We have another game this week, this time against the New York Knicks. We'll preview that, talk about what we learned, all with Nick Carboni of WCNC on the Locked On Hornets podcast.
You are Locked On Hornets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
In a minute, cuz we live.
It's Locked On Hornets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline has you covered this season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before. BetOnline, where the game starts. Thanks for making us your first listen every day. We're free and available anywhere you get your pods. That includes YouTube. I'm Walker Mail. I'm on WFNZ from 12 to 3 with Wes and Walker. Doug Branson has a substack on everyhornetsboxscore.com called, yes, Every Hornets Boxscore. And then we have Nick joining us once again, making his weekly appearance, Nick Carboni of WCNC. You can find him on Twitter. It's at Nick Carboni WCNC, is it not?
Okay, I'll fix it.
I'm just saying.
Fix it.
No, I don't know. We Doug did a hit with us on FNZ yesterday, and he called himself the best producer in the podcasting world. So we're off to a great start with the best producer.
Well, here's the thing. So, you calling it out and me fixing it is actually going to get him more followers because we pointed it out, and the folks that are watching on YouTube now have to go look at it.
It's all part of the plan.
That's true.
Yeah.
Should I call out your Xbox Live handle? Is that because we talked about that before?
The auto-generated one, Faded Duck 1500 or something. Yeah,
there you go.
I don't even know how to get online.
Don't request an online game with him because Faded Duck 1500. It's done now. He will not beat you in Call of Duty anymore. Let's talk about the Charlotte Hornets, and we're going to get to what we learned this week at the end of the show. But we have a game against the Knicks tonight. And if you look at the last two games, I kind of view them as moral victories. You feel better about this Hornets team because they were really close to beating star-laden franchises. Kawhi Leonard just hits a game-winning jumper. Okay, offensive rebound, they got that really killed the Charlotte Hornets at the end. Defensive rebounding continues to be a huge issue. But at the end of the day, Paul George, Kawhi Leonard came up with the play to win the game. Same thing against the Brooklyn Nets. I mean, the bench is kind of ridiculous right now, and the starters seem to know it with their distrust in what the bench can offer.
Ridiculous in a bad way.
Correct. So with Bryce McGowens,
you can go either. Well, I'm just saying you can go either way
Sure.
with ridiculous. You could be ridiculously good. You could be ridiculously bad. You're saying the bench ridiculously bad.
Yes, thank you for clearing up all the ways that ridiculous can actually, go with the bench. I appreciate that, best producer in the world. So when you talk about the bench, Bryce McGowens, Kai Jones, right, those are the guys you're relying on. And in the end, it was too much Kevin Durant. Not the star-laden team with the Knicks. Jalen Brunson having a very good year. Still a team that's going to be in contention towards the bottom of the playoff standings / play-in. But what do you think is the biggest story this week, Nick?
Yeah, I think it is the separation that superstars give you. I mean, look at the two games this week against the Clippers and the Nets. As you just mentioned, Ty Lue decides, hey, thanks, Coach Lue, for plugging in PG and Kawhi for the first time since right before Thanksgiving here in Charlotte, and really demoralizing everybody. And having Terry hit a big shot late in that game, really clutch moment. Too much time for Kawhi. Hits one with 1.4 seconds left. Fast forward to Wednesday, Kevin Durant hits a big shot after you basically close a 23-point gap and cut it to one. And then Kyrie gets a call in the lane that was challenged, reviewed, and still somehow upheld. I know Steve Clifford wasn't happy about that after the game. Having superstars helps. The Hornets don't have any superstars. They have a budding star right now, but he is obviously bolstered to the bench with that second injury. This will be his 10th missed game here on Friday night. So, yeah, I mean, there's really nothing more to say than superstars are the difference in the NBA. Case in point, this week. I mean, Terry and Kelly are playing their butts off, and it's just unfortunately not enough for this team.
And Doug, Hornets don't have their superstar, all-star, whatever you want to call him. He is a star, and the Hornets don't have him in LaMelo Ball, and that is going to be such a huge difference. And even Gordon Hayward, probably not a star anymore, but somebody that would be able to help this team as long as he's out there on the court. Of course, he's injured once again. Injuries continuing to just destroy the Charlotte Hornets and what they could accomplish this year.
Yeah, I think the biggest story this week is that the season is not totally lost yet, but is slowly slipping away as that big road trip, 6-game roadie against some really tough teams looms on December 18th. I mean, you look back, November 23rd, like right before Thanksgiving, they reel off 3 wins in 4 games, get blown out by Boston, but you beat Philadelphia, Minnesota, and Washington. And then, that bad loss to Milwaukee, I'm really looking at that one because Milwaukee sits 3 of their big starters and their 3 top scorers, and you really don't even compete in that game. You don't even get close to a lead like they did against the Clippers in Brooklyn. But stringing those 3 losses together, close losses to good teams, it's still losses. Moral victories are not victories. They don't count. They don't help you get into the play-in. They don't help you get into the playoffs. They don't win championships. So, I think, 0-3, the season is starting to slowly slip away. I think that's the biggest story this week.
I heard Steve Clifford. I think we played it on maybe WFNZ or this. Now every program is running together for me. But I heard from Steve Clifford discussing the fact that he does think there's going to be a team below 500 that sneaks into the play-in. I mean, if it were to happen right now, then that would be true for almost every play-in team, right? It's the New York Knicks, 12-13. It's Miami as the 10 seed, 12-14. Toronto as the 7 seed is only 1 game above 500. I expect quite a few of those teams to figure it out and become 500 or better. But Steve was making that seem like that's going to help the Charlotte Hornets, that you can be a team below 500 and make the play-in. Yeah, but you can't be crazy below, like the Charlotte Hornets right now, they're 7-18. Only 2 teams in the Eastern Conference have a worse record than them. Detroit, 7-20. Orlando, 6-20. And the Chicago Bulls, there's actually a decent gap between them. I mean, the Hornets are 3.5 games back of Chicago for the 12 seed. Yeah, easily you can make it up with all this much time left. But I think it goes to prove Doug's point, Nick, that, look, you don't want to force anybody to come back sooner than they're ready to go. At the same time, you can't just keep having each game go by and say, well, once these guys get back, you can start to see the vision of this Hornets team maybe getting into the play-in. Yeah, I mean, the vision's going to pass away if you don't have these guys coming back from injury, in the next 5-10 contests, something to that degree.
Yeah, there's always been this kind of looming tipping point, and they've been able to stave that off just like a little bit and stem that tide a little bit, but there is going to get to a point where the hole is too deep. The hole is too big to dig out of. And I think you could bring up a great point with that road trip coming up over the Christmas holiday. It is daunting for a team that is constructed as this one currently is. I mean, that could just absolutely kind of bury this team if they don't get a little bit healthier by then. And, I think Steve Clifford is kind of sharing that Terry Rozier optimism. Remember at the beginning of the year when Terry came back from his injury and he said, we're lucky, we got them all out of the way. And here they still are. So it assumes that everybody's going to come back kind of at the same time, be at full strength at the right time, and then play way above what you're playing right now just to get back in the race. Yes, they're only out of the play-in, I think, by 4 games, but I don't look at 4 teams ahead of them and say, oh yeah, they'll blow right by all of these teams and get to where they need to be. So it just gets tougher and tougher with each passing loss and each passing day where these guys don't come back. And man, it's hard to see them coming out of that road trip above water at all, unless everybody comes back by Christmas.
Yeah, you got a lot of home games in the back half of the schedule, so they're probably looking at that too. That if they can get some guys healthy, and again, the margin between wins and losses is manageable. I think that's what they're aiming for before this road trip, is to make sure that they're not 15 games below 500. I mean, if you're somewhere below 10 games below 500, then I think it's somewhat manageable with the back half of the schedule if they get everyone healthy. But if there is kind of a reverse Thanos snap and everyone is suddenly healthy, they actually have some issues to work out in terms of reacclimating those healthy players, in terms of figuring out what everyone's role is. You have to then refigure out all of the playing groups. What do you do with Kelly Oubre? I mean, he has given you everything that you could have asked for and more. I mean, if you move him to, if everybody's healthy and you move him to the bench now, I think you've got a problem on your hands. So what do you do with that? I think they've got, getting everyone healthy seems like a great thing, but it's going to introduce all of these interesting questions. And we'll see how it all shakes out.
Well, last two things. One, great point with Kelly, especially because it's Kelly, and we've heard that before from one Kelly Oubre, who
wants to be a starter, baby.
Yeah, he does. He wants to be a starter. And while I give him all the credit in the world for starting to play more inside out, as Steve Clifford describes it, he's still taking a lot of shots. The efficiency, I think, could get better if he continues to play like this, less three-point attempts on smaller volume just overall. So who knows what's going to happen. And the last thing is, remember Steve Clifford going into preseason, right before the season started, he was telling you it's going to be a process to learn these playing groups. Well, now you think about 20, 30, 35 games into the season, he still doesn't know his playing groups because he hasn't had his guys available yet.
And he didn't in the preseason either. He never had that opportunity. Nobody was ready at the same time.
Yeah. So even when these guys do come back, we need to figure out the whole chemistry side of things. So Steve Clifford needs to be the mad scientist, but also figure out something quickly. All right. Coming up next on the Locked On Hornets podcast.
Don't go to sleep on the Hornets just
Talk about what we learned this week in their games against the Brooklyn Nets, also the LA Clippers. That is still to come. Just wanted to remind you that this episode is brought to you by MasterClass. What is MasterClass? MasterClass offers classes on a wide variety of topics, all taught by world-class instructors at the top of their fields. Each class is broken out into individual video lessons, usually around 10 minutes long, and members can explore at their own pace. Each class is supported by downloadable materials, class guides, recipes, even more than that. MasterClass is accessible on your phone, web, smart TV, and available via audio mode to listen to classes on the go. You can find all available classes at masterclass.com. Over 2,500 video lessons from 180 plus of today's most brilliant minds that are available anytime, anywhere on iOS, Android, desktop, Apple TV, Amazon Fire TV, and Roku. An annual membership starts at $15 per month. This episode is also brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs. These days, every new potential hire can feel like a high-stakes wager for your small business. You want to be 100% certain that you have access to the best qualified candidates available. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the right people for your team faster and for free. Qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. You can post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNBA. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNBA to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. What did we learn? We'll tell you coming up next. Locked On Hornets
is Locked On Hornets.
I know a lot about the weight room. I know a ton about the weight. I don't lift a lot of weights, but I do kind of stand around the weight room. Are you using that? You're good? Okay, good. Okay,
yeah.
Good. And I stand around the weight room a lot.
Do you have the high socks and the headband on with your hair tied back?
Oh yeah, big like white tube socks for sure. Yeah. Headband. Yeah, I've got it all. I've got these headphones right here that you see me wearing on YouTube right now. I take these into the gym. So I'm just, it's about looking professional. You got to look the part, right? Dress for the job that you want. That's how I feel about how I am in the weight room.
It's time for more of the Locked On Hornets podcast.
Thanks for making Locked On Hornets your first listen today. Make your next listen Locked On Sports today. From the games that matter the most, the biggest stories in sports, go beyond the scoreboard and behind the scenes with local experts and insights only Locked On can provide. Before we get into what did we learn, Nick joked, and maybe not so much about us maybe leading off with Baker Mayfield. If you Carolina Panthers fans are out there, you're seeing two people right now. Me and Doug both are repping the Panthers gear in this one. After Baker Mayfield last night led the Rams into improbable, maybe impossible comeback after the way that game played out through the first three quarters, Baker Mayfield brings back the Rams 98-yard touchdown drive in the final 2 minutes, scored a touchdown with like 10 seconds left. It was ridiculous. What would be the Hornets equivalent to Baker Mayfield? Somebody that comes in with, some fanfare. I mean, a little bit, not a lot, and then is absolutely awful with the franchise, goes to another franchise and immediately performs for them. My first guess is Boris Diaw. I know he had one decent season. It soured pretty quickly here, and then he was awesome for the San Antonio Spurs. That's the best answer I have. Where are you going, Doug?
Well, I mean, but wasn't Boris good before he came to the Bobcats as well? Like, is that? I mean, was
that's
Baker...
the thing. Baker had the good playoff appearance with Cleveland, so there was something of substance there as well. That's why Boris Diaw is a better one.
All right. I'm okay with that one. But I think if you're talking about player that that is not very good for the current team that he plays for in Charlotte and then moves on to be awesome, I think there's a perfect example that's happening right now, and that's Malik Monk. Who spent 4 seasons languishing in Charlotte. 2 coaches decided that he wasn't good enough for the rotation. He goes to LA, finds a little bit of a rhythm with LeBron James, and now in Sacramento, the Beam team, he's lighting it up with his old teammate De'Aaron Fox.
I hate that. I hate that answer so much. Last one, Nick. Where are you going?
I have 2 imperfect ones that I'll blend. So the first one that came to mind when we kind of were talking about this in the pre-show, just personality-wise, was Dwight Howard. Now, he didn't go on to like carry a team to a championship. Yeah. I mean, it was like, okay, like he's got his role, whatever. But just the personality coming in, kind of the wild year that he spent in Charlotte, like very up and down, full of
it's not like Baker's
stories.
Leading a team to a championship either. So, like that works.
Right. Explicit technical fouls, like all this, like Baker's headbutting, Dwight Howard's like,
correct.
Gestures. So I'll go Dwight Howard. And look, we saw this week, anytime Nick Batum does anything for another team, especially against the Hornets, it's like, where was that? And that's how everybody felt on Thursday night watching Baker Mayfield.
Yeah, actually, Nick Batum is a great example because he lit the Hornets up in that game against. We talked about the Kawhi Leonard shot. We didn't really even in our recap talk about this Nick Batum revenge game. Like he would not miss from the corner. He settled into this bench role that he probably should have been in Charlotte, but you can't put him in that role with that contract. But yeah, Nick Batum actually might be the best answer.
Yeah, people couldn't handle the Nick Batum discourse after that. I
mean, don't put his name in the title of this podcast because nobody's downloading.
No, we want some listens, so we won't put his name in the title.
And why Nick Batum is, I think, the best answer is because both the Hornets and the Panthers chose to do that to themselves. The Panthers chose to bring that Baker Mayfield nonsense to Charlotte. The Hornets did that to themselves with Nick Batum, chose to give him that contract. So I think that's why it makes the best example.
All right, so we learned Baker Mayfield is Nick Batum. What else did we learn about the Charlotte Hornets team?
He's in LA.
Yeah, that's correct. Yes, both going to LA, just like Dwight Howard did as well. So yeah, we have a whole bunch of connections. What else did we learn this week? I know we talked about how much stars matter, Nick. Is there something else you wanted to point to via somebody performing well off of the bench? Some of the guys they have to go to, Kelly and Terry. I know you've been fond of what they've been doing here recently. What's something that you would say you learned?
I was going to keep it positive and go with like how much I admire Kelly and Terry and what they've done the last 2 games, but I've relearned how bad this team is from the free throw line.
Oh,
They were 12 of 23 in Brooklyn. It wasn't much better at home the game before against the Clippers. This team has completely fallen off a cliff from the charity stripe. I know you guys kind of broke down the reasons why this week, but that is just tough to watch. And for a coach that values free throw attempts as much as Steve Clifford does, if he had any hair left, it would all be gray by now watching this team shoot free throws this year. They're absolutely awful in that category.
Yeah, going to that point, I mean, you're right. We did talk about it a little bit. It hit me in this last game more so than it had the rest of the season. Oh, all their injured players are the best free throw shooters on this team. Oh, okay. This makes sense now. Miles Bridges not with this team, also a good free throw shooter. LaMelo, Gordon, yes, that will hurt them. And even with PJ being better this year, thank God, because that was one thing he wasn't good at and pretty consistently not good at with PJ Washington. He's been better, but he was not good. I think 1 of 4 this last time out. So yeah, that's a good thing. Bad thing to learn, but a good thing to bring to the table that we learned.
Well, and it's especially bad, right, because of the margins of these games.
Correct.
If you just, it's the classic kind of thing that you sit at home and go, if you just hit your free throws, the freebies, if you just hit those. And it's why I think in my notebook, I believe for the Not the LA game. I think it was the Brooklyn game. I wrote down, here we go. 34 seconds left in the Brooklyn game. I wrote down in my everyhornetsboxscore.com notebook, Plumlee fouled, death. And he missed both. They were down 4. So...
yes, and I'm trying to do this on the fly, but it's bad when Mason Plumlee is your third best free throw shooter in the starting lineup. In that game against the Brooklyn Nets, Terry Rozier went 0 of 1. PJ Washington was 1 of 4. So it was Mason Plumlee basically by default after that. Kelly Oubre was 60%. Jalen went 2 of 2, but not very good. What'd you learn this week, Doug?
Well, before I get to what did we learn this week, because I am looking at my notebook here. By the way, you can get my notebook on everyhornetsboxscore.com.
Perfect.
Is that somewhere we can read? I see it right here.
It's everyhornetsboxscore.com. Right.
Perfect.
But I'm sitting here looking at the notebook, and one thing we didn't mention in that Brooklyn recap, okay, the Hornets are down 4. It's, it is 2 possessions, but they're down 4 with 13 seconds. Really, it was like 34 seconds left in the game. And the Hornets decide not to foul. And instead, they opt to give, they just gave Kyrie Irving a floater in the lane, and then they're down 6. The game was over. But that decision not to foul was baffling to me. It's one of the few things that I can point to and go, and it didn't look like the team was like confused or like Clifford was begging for a foul. It seemed like that
wasn't part of the strategy. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's one of the few times I can point to and go, man, Clifford sort of outfoxed himself on that one.
Well, and I wonder how much, as crazy as it might sound, I wonder how much he trusted their defense because they put together a couple good defensive possessions in a row to that point. And I wonder if they were just looking for a steal look, I'm not saying there was an overwhelming amount of evidence to be confident in this team defensively, but they had put together a couple of good possessions until that point. Yeah, so I'm just trying to get into the head of one, Steve.
It's a good point because one of the things that the Hornets have done consistently all season, despite the injuries, is generate steals. And there have been a few instances this season where on an inbounds play, they have been able to mix things up and make things interesting. I think back to that like crazy comeback that got them back into that Cleveland game was full of those sort of moments. So I get that, but at the same time, I just felt like against a really good team, like Kyrie's not going to do that. Kyrie's not going to give up the basketball. Kevin Durant's not going to give up the basketball. So
was Claxton on the floor? If he was on the floor, then that would have been the guy to go to because he's worse than Mason Plumlee is at shooting free throws. So maybe that.
Okay. Anyway, that's not what I learned this week. What I learned this week is what we talked about in the last episode, Walker, but I'll bring it up again, which is that I believe that Terry Rozier and Kelly Oubre have given up on the Hornets bench, and they really feel as if it's all up to them at this point. And PJ Washington, they're all taking a vast majority of the shots. The bench players are kind of standing in a corner, with the exception of Maladon, who comes in. Rabbi de Sonk. He gives you the quick 5. That's, by the way, Nick, that's a quick 5 in French.
I heard it. Yeah.
Rabbi de Sonk.
No, that's just what Doug does. It's a new condition. He just screams French words in between.
I just randomly say French words,
Yeah.
With the exception of Maladon, I really feel like they've given up on the bench. And Clifford, too. Playing Nick Richards only 9.5 minutes against Brooklyn after he doesn't secure that defensive rebound. Easy defensive rebound for Nick Richards to get in that first half, and he doesn't come down with it, and Sumner does, and it leads to, I believe, a Seth Curry 3 in the corner. That's what I learned this week, is that it feels like Clifford, Oubre, and Rozier have given up on the Hornets bench, and maybe they got a point. They've got a reason to at this point.
I'll tell you what I learned in just a moment. Coming up next on the Locked On Hornets podcast. Oh, yeah, there's a tease.
Don't go to sleep on the Hornets
There's
just yet.
Something I learned that was good at the beginning of the season. We were pretty happy about it, and it's starting to come back down to earth. We'll talk about that and preview the Knicks in just a moment. This episode is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline.net is your number one source for sports betting info, stats, news, and analysis. You can get the latest odds and trends for every professional and amateur league out there, from football to basketball to soccer and esports. We've got it all on BetOnline. And if you love sports podcasts, I hope you do, you can find those on BetOnline as well. We're always the fastest and the easiest way to get your betting fix. You can head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more. BetOnline, where the game starts. I'll tell you what I learned this week, coming up next. Locked On Hornets.
This is Locked On Hornets.
To start this off, we all know about LeBron and how he built a school and it got a lot of fanfare. By the time 2019 closes, Bismack Biyombo is planning to have 6
Take
schools.
that, LeBron.
It's time for more of the Locked On Hornets podcast.
We'll get to the Knicks game in just a moment. Hopefully the Hornets can get back in the win column tonight. I learned a couple things. One, I learned that the excitement surrounding the young big guys on this team, it took a step back a little bit. Nick Richards getting benched in the second half after his great start to the season, starting to lose the luster off of the Nick Richards shine. And then Kai Jones, Kai Jones, after coming in and giving you a lot of hustle plays, and it was fantastic for a little while. It doesn't mean that he was going to be good every single game, but he's really cooled off here in the last few times that he's been out there. When you look at Kai Jones, only 2 points in 14 minutes against the Clippers. You look at him having 3 fouls, 3 turnovers against the Brooklyn Nets. And so Steve Clifford is just deciding, okay, we tried this a little while. I'm not trusting it anymore. Let's just play Mason Plumlee for 30 minutes a game again. And that's what they're going to. The other thing I learned has to do with the bench. The young backcourt player that Steve Clifford is going to right now is not James Bouknight. It's instead Bryce McGowens. Maybe that's the young backcourt player with this team you should be excited about. And maybe the least trusted young backcourt player on this team is your first round pick from last year in James Bouknight. I'm not telling you that. Steve Clifford is telling you that. That's Bryce McGowens playing 20 in this most recent game, getting more minutes the last few contests. That's Teo Maledon, who's been awesome this year as a guy that can just come in, organize the offense, and has Doug saying French nicknames. So that's what we're learning, right? I mean, Steve Clifford was asked about that on the Kyle Bailey show, and Steve said, look, James Bouknight, he's working through it. Bryce McGowens has taken advantage of an opportunity, and he's been playing very well. Ultimately, it sounded like Bouknight's not going to be back in the rotation anytime soon until Bryce McGowens, I would imagine, gives him a reason not to. So those are a couple things I learned this week.
Nick, are you on the Bryce bandwagon? Better get on quick.
I think he's been fun to watch in spurts, and it is nice to see a second round pick contributing. I mean, one of those guys early in the season, even when there were injuries, I thought, okay, like they're just going to kind of keep him in Greensboro for the most part and kind of develop him. But it's been nice to watch him out there. It's kind of weird. Like they don't really look alike, but their bodies are the same. He and Teo, it's just like every time I have to do like a double take of like who has the ball or like who's making the play when they're both out there, they're very similar kind of body types.
Well, it's funny you mentioned that because I think James Bouknight and Bryce McGowens play similarly. Yeah. When you go for both of those backcourt players, they are attacking guards. It's exactly what you loved from James Bouknight coming out of college. Bryce McGowens was going to the free throw line quite a bit at Nebraska. The shooting was questionable. Bouknight shot really well in workouts, apparently. I don't know about McGowens. I don't know what was reported there with the shooting and workouts, but he's actually hitting at a decent clip. We saw some really impressive performances from McGowens in Summer League. Sometimes he would take a lot of shots and miss, but he did give you the fire performances. Yeah, it also, I think, helps Mitch Kupchak stave off a little criticism from the drafting the last couple of years. Because if you think about it, Mark Williams isn't playing right now. You don't have James Bouknight playing right now.
Jalen Duren is playing.
Kai Jones,
AJ Griffin's playing. I'll tell you that.
Yeah, that's true. AJ Griffin
Check
is
those
playing.
Minutes.
Yeah, so Kai Jones. So it doesn't stave off the criticism for Doug, but just I guess think about how much worse it would be if McGowens wasn't coming in and helping out a little bit. Yeah, just it would be nice for Kupchak if McGowan started to hit earlier than anticipated.
No one answered my question, by the way. No one answered my question. Nick, are you on the band? It sounds like you're riding a horse next to the bandwagon. Look, I'll just tell you, we've installed a hot tub on the bandwagon. The bandwagon is fun right now. The Bryce bandwagon
I'm already
is
on
hopping.
the Teo bandwagon. Am I supposed to like do one of those cowboy stunts where I'm like got a boot on each bandwagon?
You're on the Teo bandwagon with the crusty baguettes. You got
that's a lot more high class than the Bryce bandwagon.
Yeah, right.
100%. Yeah, you've got 1 foot in each of the hot tubs on each of those bandwagons. So it is fun. The backcourt, the young backcourt, it's giving you something. Isn't it fun? Like you go to the beginning of the season, we were desperate for some backcourt depth. Think about how bad it was with only LaMelo.
Hold on. Pause there. The right word, just thinking about what we've talked about in this third segment, the right word there is desperate. We're desperate for something. We're desperate for LaMelo Ball to return so 100%. That we can stop talking extensively about Teo Mal. I mean, no disrespect to Teo Maladone and Bryce McGowens. But all three of us would love to be talking about the Ball bandwagon.
Don't pretend to be on the Bryce bandwagon anymore after disparaging it. You can get out of the hot tub, take your rubber ducky, get out. You're no longer allowed here in the hot tub anyway. Preview for the Knicks, Doug. What kind of stats do you have for tonight's game against New York?
Oh, man. I mean, there's some stats here that indicate this could be a rough one, fellas. And really, it's all about the rebounding. I'm looking at these cleaning the glass stats, and right now, in terms of like offensive rebounding, the Knicks are very good at it. And of course, we talked a lot about the fact that the Hornets have not been able to put up good defensive rebounding numbers this season. But on the flip side, the Hornets are good at offensive rebounding and the Knicks are bad at defensive rebounding. So it's really, I think, one stat you could watch is those offensive rebounding numbers. The second chance points too, because, this is interesting that in the game against LA, I believe the Hornets out offensive rebounded the Clippers, doubled them up in offensive rebounds, but came away with the same number. Oh no, the Clippers, it was 25-15 against the Brooklyn Nets. Yeah. Against the Brooklyn Nets, they had 10 offensive rebounds to the Nets 5, but they had the same number of second chance points. So not converting on enough of those opportunities. It was I think a story from that Nets Hornets game. So yeah, I think the offensive rebounding numbers definitely something to watch here against the Knicks, who have a lot of size down low.
All right, Nick, finish this up. What's one thing you're watching tonight against the Knicks?
I would say the bench. I mean, when you're talking about kind of coming in and being able to get those rebounds and be physical against Julius Randle, who's coming off an absolute monster game, not just in points, but rebounds as well. So Nick Richards, I think, has to step it up and get back to the level that he was playing at. The Knicks come in, they're a balanced team. I mean, they've held their last two opponents to, I think, under 90 points. So they're playing pretty well right now on both ends. But yeah, I'll go with the rebounding, and I'll kind of say that Nick Richards has to be better tonight to be able to win.
All right, Hornets are 4-point dogs. You had one other thing, Doug?
Well, just a couple of other notes, because we didn't mention the P.J. Washington eye injury that he got against Brooklyn. He had to miss the rest of the game, but he's not on the injury report, so he should be able to play. Can he secure a rebound? I mean, that's one guy I'm watching on the boards too. He's got to get better at these defensive rebounds for sure. And then another note, as I was looking through these stats, the Hornets, in terms of converting in transition, have really fallen back from how they were doing early in the season. It was an edict from Clifford. He wanted them to play super fast. They're getting transition opportunities off steals. They're generating steals. They're generating turnovers at a good rate, and they're scoring on those. But off live rebounds, this team has really gotten stuck in the mud. And so I think that's if they can speed the Knicks up. It's difficult because the Knicks play. It's difficult for the Hornets to move fast, but the Knicks don't play great transition defense. So if they can speed this thing up, I think they can give themselves a shot to win.
All right, that'll do it for Locked On Hornets. That's Nick Carboni. You can catch him on WCNC, and you can catch his Twitter handle at Nick Carboni, WCNC. Don't catch his Xbox Live handle because he will not be able to play you online. Nick, thanks so much for the time, man. Always appreciate it.
Thank you, guys.
All right, thanks for making us your first listen. For your second listen today, check out Locked On Sports Today. From the games that matter the most to the biggest stories in sports, go beyond the scoreboard and behind the scenes with local experts and insights only Locked On can provide. Locked On Sports Today, available on this app, YouTube, and wherever you get your podcast. Have a great weekend. We'll be back with you on Monday.